This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe a leader who has consulted over 200 business leaders and entrepreneurs within numerous industries in the United States, Australia, China, and Europe. He's served in various roles in organizations such as Amazon, Siemens, and Telecom Australia. He's currently a principal consultant for Quantum Leaders, Inc., and he utilizes a unique framework to reinvent organizations and inspire a paradigm shift in the way we think about leadership. This is Vitaly Geyman. The Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Well, Vitaly, welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron leadership movement. I know our tribe is excited to hear from you today, and I've teed you up pretty well in the lead-in for the bio. And I think we're all excited to know about what is this living organization that you specialize in. So first off, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, James. So living organization, a few years back, 3 years back, I met a gentleman called Norman Wolf, like a wolf. And, he wrote a book called The Living Organization, that's on Amazon. And he spent 42 years in consulting world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I spent about 25, but he's doubled almost on me. And he's a HP executive. He was a HP executive, and he was in charge of the US division for service and customer service. And when he inherited that division, it was about 1,200 people. There was a problem. Basically, they brought him in to turn around. It was one of the worst performing customer service divisions in HP. And the CEO, who was the original, the Hewlett Packard guys, he said, listen, you got to turn this around. And so he couldn't figure out what the hell's going on. I mean, it seemed to be an advanced organization. HP was competing with IBM, but they weren't doing good. They weren't doing good. And so what he looked at is he looked at it, what's the underlying root cause of this lack in performance, and he was approaching it more like a living system, It's like an organic system rather than just saying, well, people just don't want to do customer service. Well, why? Why am there? And he then find out that the root cause, after really talking and really listening to a lot of people and listening from the heart, actually, not just listening as a logical guy, but listening like to everybody in a very deep, from a deep level. And he found out that it seems to be the culture of organizations who were rewarding the salespeople. They were like the big heroes, the cowboys,
Right.
Isn't that always a lot of the case, right? But there was only very few of them who were actually getting those big paychecks and bonuses. But the rest of the organization was, people who were supporting them. The admin staff, usually the women, and who are doing all the hack work, and they were getting blamed for every problem there is, not acknowledged for all their work, and the guys were getting rewarded. Anyway, he turned around he created a new story for organization. He said, listen, this is how it's going to work from now on. And, in cooperation with people, we're going to acknowledge everybody, particularly our support staff. That admin girl is just a young girl who just walked in, and puts her heart and soul into this, but she doesn't get acknowledged. All she gets is blamed for something. And so he turned around and he created a story, and then he walked the talk, right, for 5 years or more. And basically, he turned around the whole organization towards one of the best performing service divisions in the world. People were coming in and watching how this organization actually performs customer service. So that's kind of the anecdote or the story behind it. And then from there on in that book, he realized that organizations are actually more like living beings, organizations themselves, not just people. So it's like a cellular system where when a bunch of people come together, they form a whole other thing called organization, and that organization is a living being all on its own. And if you,
So
yeah,
I saw the book cover is actually that of a tree or
yeah,
of a plant or something, right? So I think that's what I'm visualizing in my mind, right? A living thing that has roots and stems and leaves and things like that.
yeah, that's a good. It's like if we're smart, there is a thing called biomimicry, right? Where do we get a lot of our? I mean, you're an Air Force guy, helicopters and so on, right? We looked at nature, and we go, how does that work? And nature's
That's
pretty
right.
smart, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so why not look at how nature organizes itself, you know,
Hmm.
because in a very symbiotic, very organic, very adaptive relation, it basically survived evolution, so it's probably pretty smart, right? And so look to nature, and this is what we basically mimicked understanding of how living systems works and applied it to organizations.
I see. Okay. So one of the things that you talk about with the living organization is energy.
Yes.
Talk to me about, are you talking about energy from the executive leader's perspective? Are you talking about energy of the overall organization? What is energy?
Yeah, very good. Exactly, because we use that word in all sorts of ways, right? I mean, we use that word in terms of like human energy, right? We also use it as a physical, kinetic energy, dynamic energy, right? From a physics point of view. Both me and Norman are also into quantum physics a lot, right? And because to understand the nature of reality, now a lot of us, I'm not a religious person, so I go to science and I say, well, how does things work? And one of the things we realize, even from Newtonian physics, is energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? It just changes forms, right?
Yes,
So
correct.
we started from that and we said, okay, so what is organization then? What is an organization at its very core? And we said, oh, it's just an energy transfer mechanism. So somebody gets an idea and they go, oh, I want to do something. I want to serve something. I want to help someone. Well, it comes, I don't know where that idea comes from. Usually, to this day, I don't know where these ideas come from, but they come from somewhere, right?
Right.
Uh, and then, I'm going to create the best computer ever, or Steve Jobs.
Right.
And then they get resources, right? They get a bunch of smart people together in a garage, and they start hacking away at it, and something comes out, and they deliver this product, and then it serves the customers. Well, that product is a combination of our effort, our energy, right? It's been transferred from an idea through physical means and design into something, but it's still energy. It's just transferred form, right, into a solid
Yes,
product.
I
And
like
then,
that.
does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm
Yeah.
visualizing it even. Yes.
Yeah, literally. I mean, and then that computer goes to a customer and they go, "Oh my God, it solves a problem for me." Well, we've just, let's continue. Now not only the product is the energy, but how you service and present to the customer. You can present it with a positive energy, or you can present it with a really kind of, we don't care, just buy the damn thing and give us the money. Transactional energy, right?
Right.
And that makes a huge difference, right? So you can see that from an energy transfer point of view, right?
So would you say from to leaders that are out there right now, would you say like in their minds and in my mind as I'm taking notes on this, is there a direct relation to the amount of energy you bring to work every day? And does that transfer to your peers and your subordinates and the leaders above you and all that? I mean, do you believe that that can be sensed and that it actually is transferable?
Absolutely. You're setting me up perfectly, by the way, Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah, and you could have said it in not as a question but as a statement. But I love the question. So it's a
And we
perfect.
didn't practice this, by the way. So,
No, no,
yeah, okay. That's right.
uncut, unrehearsed. That's right. This is I love, and this is one of the things we teach. By the way, what we're doing right now, me and you, it's called one of the skills we teach in living. It's called improvisation. Right? We improvise.
Sure.
I've done a lot of acting, improvisational acting. So okay, perfect. So is there a correlation between the energy level, right? The people have in organization and basically results that we produce, right? I would say it's almost a direct correlation, right? Uh,
Mm.
because I mean, you know yourself, like I mean, if you walk into a store and a salesman is sitting there and he's looking at his iPad or whatever, and he's just like totally disengaged. I mean, how much sales is going to do in that
That's
store?
right.
And but if you walk in and somebody's like really, I mean, without bothering you, but really heart centered and shakes your hand and says, "Wonderful! It's so great to see you. Browse around. Any questions? I'll support you." It's like in that split second, he changes the energy not of the whole place, you know, because other people are watching as well, and that's the kind of salesperson that's going to get a lot of sales eventually. And it's not just in sales, and it's in even you go all the way back through the value chain. It's on operations. How do people approach to operating the company, even supply chain, or even how you treat your suppliers. So, in a nutshell, we divided the energy into three levels. Okay, there's three
Okay.
fields of energy we call. This is our uniqueness, if you like, our secret sauce to this living organization. Is the first level is activity level. So the guy walks in and he just basically, you could just say, okay, look around in the place and do whatever you want. Okay, it's just you just out of those words, the activity words. There is no emotional content to them. Fair enough. It's just a transaction to them. And activity we do every day. We make products. We make, we plan ahead. These are all activities. We restructure and structure. Within the organization, we call that all activities. And unfortunately, we spend 90% or more of our efforts looking at activity energy, basically. And right. So
So you're saying like activity energy. An example would be if you were just managing something and you needed your employees to make 10 widgets that day, you're watching them make 10 widgets that day, and that's an activity level.
exactly. Or
Okay.
even you may even be scheduling different shifts and all of that kind of things. But this is still activity, by the way.
Okay.
You even
Yeah.
prioritizing, it's all activity. Just saying, oh, what should I do first? What should I do second? That is pretty much action oriented. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the second level of energy field is relationship. And that is how do you relate to people, the quality of relationship, right? So once again, a customer walks in the store, and how I am being with them, right? That's the word being. Am I being excited? Am I being open? Am I being interested? Really affects the result, the impact that I'm having, right? Would you agree? I mean,
I would totally agree. I would also challenge you, are there not levels within the relationship? Like, meaning this, like, the more authentic you are, the more vulnerable you
yes,
are, the more
yes,
sincere you are, that term relationship goes much deeper, and it actually it creates a more solid connection the more authentic you are. Any of the other examples I gave.
absolutely. Exactly. I mean, that's what in this way this podcast is a lot is all about, right? How do we relate with people? From what space, I mean, we can label them, or whatever, but from what space where are you coming from, and so very often my mentors used to say, how do you show up into work, how do you show up already kind of bored and disgruntled and frustrated, or do you show up excited and open and receptive, so yeah, I mean, that's a
It's
very
funny
different.
that
Uh-huh.
like when you were describing activity and when you transferred into relationships, I, that's exactly how I was visualizing myself. Like when I talk to other leaders, when I instruct in leadership courses or coach or anything like that, it's there. Now there has to be an underlying sense of authenticity and sincerity and all of those things. But as a leader, you've got to switch yourself on. You've got to, like, even if you don't have the energy to go to work, you've got to at least go to work and be energetic because you're at work, and you've got to show that you're determined and focused and all of those things. And I think that crosses both lines of activity and relationships, about how you got to switch it on. It's your job, it's your role, and you need to do that for your people and for yourself too.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're role modeling, right? You're walking your talk.
That's right.
One of my clients,
right.
Carolyn Taylor, she wrote the book Walk the Talk, Walking the Talk. It's very famous in the early 2000s, and it's what she teaches, So,
So that's 2 out of the 3.
2 out of the 3, and the third one is we didn't know what to call it because we didn't want to call it culture or mindset. So we decided to call it context energy, right? We use the word context in a different, what's your context for this? But in this case, we wanted to use context as basically understand the why, the deep why behind what you do, right? It's the meaning, the meaning that the belief systems that you use, and the values that come through. It's also about the story that you have about the workplace. My story is, it's a paycheck, right? Another story is, another story, it's a place where I go and play and have fun and explore and come up with new stuff, someone else's story, maybe it's different, right? But that story, because I studied psychology for 22 years, that story is what we kind of are programmed already for many years. It's a programming and conditioning in our mind that we have of how we view the world. It's like our perspective. And that is the most important thing out of all those 3 energies, this is probably the most important one.
That's so interesting. You started off when you first started describing the origins of the living organization, and you talked about Wolf. When Wolf started to transform HP, you kept referring to it as he was telling the story, and he stuck to the story and all that. So it seems like a lot of this is centered around the power of story and storytelling. And it's not about moving the boxes from one side of the warehouse to the other side of the warehouse. It's why we're moving them there and what will be produced by moving them to the other side and all those kind of things.
You literally could have given me I'll give you a story of I think it's Bob Chapman. He's the CEO of a huge multi-billion-dollar packaging company. He's the owner, and I think he tells that story. If I'm a little bit wrong, he basically comes to a forklift driver and he says, "What are you doing there?" And he says, "I'm moving the boxes." And he goes, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah. Why are you doing it?" "Well, because those book boxes need to be moved." Okay. Yeah. And then another forklift driver would say, "What I'm doing is I'm putting it in a place where the pickup truck can pick it up really fast, because it's really urgent for the end client that they get this part. Without it, they can't start their manufacturing. So I'm a very key part of the whole process." So it's a very different, right, understanding of what they're doing. Yeah. So.
I have a great friend of mine by the name of Jim Kerr, and he's a big culture guy. And he talks about, for people to have the proper vision, it should be told in a vision story. It's got to be in a story context, to your point about the energy, because that's how people envision it in their mind. They play that movie in their head almost about this is why I'm doing it, or this is where I'm going. And I guess humans are inclined to be like that.
Yes, we're story driven. If you look at all the leaders of the world, the Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, Jesus, Buddhas, right? What did they do? Mm-hmm. They told stories, the most powerful stories. And the reason stories work is because biologically we're actually designed to believe in this abstract world. I mean, a country is a story, by the way. A country, and it will die for a country, right?
That's true.
Right? I mean,
yes.
If you think about it, have you seen a country in nature produced by nature?
No.
Right? It's a man-made abstract concept. And this is
Yeah.
what Yuval Hariri, if you read his book, I don't know if you read Homo Sapiens, and where he asked the questions, why do humans, I mean, that's a more fundamental question, became so dominant and basically the dominant species on the planet? Why did someone else? Why do Homo sapiens? There were other sapiens, by the way. And he found
Right.
out that because we have this phenomenal ability, this actually I think it's a frontal lobe, to believe in abstract stories, right? And then around that
Yeah.
story, we can organize ourselves.
So that that's a huge aha moment for this conversation. That it should be a core competency for a leader in today's world to be able to tell the story. And I think we put it a lot in. Oh, you got to give them the vision. Give them the vision statement. But the realities are, you have to tell the story. You got to put the context
Of course,
into really why people are showing up every day.
exactly. Yes.
I love that.
Joseph Campbell. Do you know? I'm mentioning Joseph Campbell is the guy who's in the hero story. And he said, if you look at all stories, Hollywood stories and all the best stories, they have a hero, right? And he goes on a challenge, and he overcomes the challenges, and he almost dies in the end, and then he becomes victorious in the end. And this is that's how we learn through life, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so CEOs need to be able to co-create. By the way, it's not about CEO story that he conjures up somewhere in the co-create with the people a common story, a common narrative that represents the values, the belief system, the heroes of the company. And then they need to support that with real stuff like performance, pay people according to that, allocate job responsibilities, roles, and so on. Right? They actually have to support that for resources.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've got to back up. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Otherwise, it's just a false story.
You mentioned something, Vitaly, early about how Wolf also listened from the heart. I
Right.
wrote that down because I think that's pretty powerful too. So if you've got someone who's got the right level of activity, they form relationships, in an authentic way, and they place things in context,
Right.
with a story that means something. Uh, but you got to have heart too, right? Does that follow, I guess, along the lines with authenticity and sincerity? Or, like when you say you listen from the heart, that's a pretty powerful thing because, I was on a podcast the other day and we talked about how important it is to actively listen, right? To be an active listener. You're just not hearing people and all that, but you're saying all the way down to the heart, listen from the heart.
Yes, yes. I mean, like when I was I was doing MBA and so on. I was teaching us active listening, and you know, and active listening is basically don't fall asleep. And don't start thinking about lunch while you're listening to other people. I mean, try to participate in the process, right? It's a two-way listening, right? And there's many different kind of listening. Sometimes it's listening to what's behind what people are saying and what are they not saying, right? I remember doing all those courses, uh, and this is good for negotiation and sales. That's what we've been taught.
Right.
Listening from the heart it's a whole different skill that's dropping into the basically like it's about recognizes that this is a living being you're talking about. It's not an employee, okay? It's not a machine. It's not even a role. It's not a marketing manager or a forklift driver. It's a person just like you with his own pains and and with his own problems, and you want to be able to compassionately listen to what is the issue they're dealing with. And when you listen from that space, you start hearing different things.
Right. Right. Can you give me an example, I guess, of a conversation that would go for someone that's in a leadership position and they need to change the way they have the type of conversation with somebody, or even the way that they're framing their perception of this other person? Say there's someone that's coming in and all of a sudden they're a great performer, but in the last week or so they're underperforming, and you're having that conversation. What is listening with the heart all about in that kind of scenario?
Okay, maybe I'll go back briefly to Bob Chapman example. Yeah, and I think because for me, it made a real impact. So Bob, I think it's a $1.2 billion company. He's the owner, and one day he goes to a guy on the floor, and he dresses him up as he does this mystery CEO thing. Nobody knows he's the boss. He just walks up, says, "How's it doing? What's been happening?" He just pretends he's some like a local manager. He goes, "Oh, I don't know. Nothing's happening really." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "It just sucks. This job sucks, and I'm not feeling that good." And he goes, "Well, why? What's the matter?" He goes, "I go home. It's the same routine. I do this stupid job. I come home. I kick the cat. I argue with my wife, and in the morning I'm back again." And he goes, "So you're not really? Doesn't sound like you're happy here."
Right.
And he goes, "No, it stinks. I don't think I'm getting rewarded properly. I don't think anybody acknowledging me. I just feel invisible. And my daughter doesn't speak to me anymore. My wife is probably on the brink of the divorce there, and I feel like I'm totally disconnected and alienated. He goes, "Okay." Now the interesting thing is, Bob then turns around. Bob was a Christian. And he says, and he, for some reason, that particular conversation just struck a chord with him. He said, "I think I'm responsible for this man's misery." And not only that, I have thousands of people like him. And not only that, he realized the scale of this. It's not just this man. Okay, this man might not fit his role or whatever, but he's spreading it through his family, and his family is spreading through the whole community. So if I have 1,000 people, that's probably like millions of people I'm affecting. I am affecting as a manager, as a boss.
Right.
And it's my responsibility. And he's just like, he had this like aha moment. He goes, "Oh shit!" Like literally, I'm a Christian. I go to church and I say, and it's all about love, and yet this is what I've been doing in society. This is what I'm sending that kind of energy into society. So he literally shifted, and he said, "My job should be to create happiness in the place, to really care out of my heart, like I care for my daughter or my sister, about for my employees, because the repercussions of it travels throughout the whole of society." And so that one deep listening conversation has shifted his whole company. I mean, literally, he turned around his whole company towards a much more caring, much more place for people to be in.
That's a pretty heavy burden to put on your shoulders, though, as a leader, to say, like, it's not only my employees, but it's their families. It's from the family to the community, and that really starts to resonate quite a few layers out for sure.
Absolutely. But you can see, and this is exactly. I mean, now we're going through all this coronavirus and so on, and managers actually have to become compassionate listeners and really listen to people, because their lives are at stake.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
How do we do that without sounding fake and without trying to put on some kind of personality?
And is there anything wrong with listening from the heart? I mean, is there anything like, what if all of a sudden, you have someone that the way that they've been raised, the way that they've been trained or taught to be very cold and unemotional, and like, don't get involved in personal things. So that's like an exact opposite, and when most people have been taught and trained to act like.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, very often people think that the work is not a psychotherapy session, right? So you should do the work and shut up, right? And don't bring your emotions to that, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's a very common thing, to be cold-hearted more than with a true heart. But I think one of the things that we get after, and in how you're talking about this living organization, is the true realities of to be living and to have these compassions and to be authentic and all these things. it's pretty undeniable to be at a high performing organization and a high performing leadership capability. You've got to have heart. You just have to. You have to have that as a possession.
Yeah, particularly, I mean, look at the situation right now. I mean, we just put out a message to all the leaders to say, and Mike put out a very interesting message. You know, what you see right now, a lot of leaders just repeating how well they're, doing, and they're putting all these pictures that they're doing all this crisis management and they're helping their customers and so on. I mean, in these times of trouble, this kind of stuff, they start with that, right? And everybody
Right.
goes, okay, well, you put out already 10 of those messages. That doesn't relate to me, really. Like, what are you doing for me? What are how are you relating to that? And like, where is the heart in this? I mean, the most ridiculous thing that I actually saw, one of my clients, his CEO sent out a message, which sounded, by the way, like he's coming from the heart. He felt apologetic. He said to them, I'm sorry that, for economic disturbance, for stress and so on, for maybe some of you are going to be working much harder than usual. And then the next day, he was sending out a list of people who were getting sacked.
Oh, geez.
Right? And there were temp employees. And he was literally the next 2 or 3 days from now on, there was a list of people who were getting, and the people were getting, wait a minute, you just told us basically that you're listening and you have compassion. And then he said, yes, but I'm also a manager and I have to make decisions and I have to cut costs and so on. Well, maybe it was better not to pretend that you're such a compassionate guy, but to say reality, listen, authentically, we're going to have to cut costs and some of you are going to have to go.
Yeah, his credibility is shot through the entire organization now.
Yeah, you might as well. Yeah, so it's the same. And I understand, listen, I was also in many management positions. Stuff happens like from day to day, you have to make decisions. And sometimes you have to make an opposite decision to what you've done before. So it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to be consistent,
So how would you, so that's a good example. Maybe we should all learn off of is you put something out with sincerity and then 24 hours later, you're going to have to change exactly that message. So what's the approach then? How do you do it? Even if, if you've got to call the bad news as it is, how do you recover out of that?
You mentioned the magic word for me these days, this authenticity. And I always reflect, what is authenticity? It's not that you don't make mistakes, right? It's to cover up your mistakes. It's not about covering up your mistakes. They're almost the opposite. Like if you really made a mistake, then you say, yeah, yesterday I thought we're not going to have to cut anybody. That's why I said that, send the message. But guys, this is what happened today. I feel totally inauthentic. I feel like I'm reversing on you what I just said, but that's just the reality. So that's kind of being authentic, right? Like,
yeah, it is.
I mean, like I'm in this position.
That's right. I think most people, again, if you're truthful and honest and you have that level of credibility through authenticity, they will always accept that, right? I mean, people know that these scenarios, especially like in today, and again, for our listening audience, we're still in the height of the COVID pandemic. Most of the United States is still shut down. We've just kind of are discussing now what the opening plan is to be, but we haven't even begun to get into the first phases of it. So we're in this together. That there's over, what is it? It's 13 million now unemployed in the last month alone, Vitaly. And, that was 13 million people that probably had this scenario happen to them, to where one day they're like, hey, it's okay, we think this will pass, to the next day you're laid off.
Right. I mean, it's very unpredictable. I mean, we already had a VUCA world, right? Volatile, unpredictable.
That's right.
And this is a whole other level of unpredictability. So whatever, almost I realize as a manager, as a leader, whatever you do is going to be undone sooner or lalater. Right?
I love, that's a great statement. Whatever you do will eventually be undone. That's a great statement.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, so you're living in, so those who are kind of want to maintain this kind of, I don't know, persona that they're consistent and they're always right. That's the worst time to be in. because
Yeah,
they're
that's
always going to be always wrong at some stage or another. Yeah, so the only way I see to be authentic is to be vulnerable.
and which is hard for people, which is very hard for people to be that way. But I think I agree. Right, the only way to be truly authentic is to show your vulnerability, and
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that.
absolutely.
You mentioned a word earlier about our conversation, but then you talked about a VOCA scenario that we're in now. So you used the word improv.
Right.
You were saying that we have an improv conversation right now. We weren't rehearsing when I asked you the one question, which is a true fact. How do you think in today's environment where it's just filled with uncertainty and ambiguity and everything else, it's just there and it's churning. Literally, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. What are the traits that you see that to be able to, improvise in situations like this? Because there are so many people that have, these conservative mindsets as a personality. And, so they're used to standard operating procedures. They're used to, it says you do ABC, we do ABC. What are the traits that you see, or what were some of the mindsets that you think about from a living organization when it comes to being able to improvise?
Perfect, and perfect. Yeah, there's a four core skills we teach in living organization. First one is hard listening. The second one, one of the most important, is improvisational mindset. So it's about having the kind of mindset that is very agile and very flexible, and responds to the situation in the moment as appropriately within the context. It doesn't hang on to the past as much. What you it's actually, it's like what is now? What is the now? And actually, the military, believe it or not, is probably one of the good examples. They call it business agility. Well, I remember, I can't remember, Team of Teams. I think that's the book.
Yep.
Yeah, when they were in Iraq and they had all this teams.
McChrystal's team of teams. Yep.
Right. The squadrons that are pretty much been isolated, and they couldn't get any communication from the headquarters, so they had to become extremely agile, right, and improvise on the spot. And they found they weren't trained enough for that. They were always trained to take orders. So that's one good example there, where we need to literally train not just the managers but the teams themselves to improvise and not take so much direction from the top, but be self-directed or self-managed.
Absolutely. Like with my military background, they have a thing called the agility loop, which you could argue says is the, improvise loop, and agility loop is you make sense of the situation, you make a choice, then you make it happen, and then you make revisions, and then it just keeps looping. Right. And if you empower your people to think in those terms, a lot of times big problems don't even rise to senior leadership because it's all solved at the lowest thing, because you just have people that have that improv mindset that you talk about.
Exactly. And as an actor, by the way, I took some acting courses because I love acting. I was trained to do improvisation in a very specific way, and the exercise we did was called yes and. Yes and. And the way it went like this: when somebody gives you a cue, right, they say, "Hey, let's go and climb up the wall." Okay. The conventional thinking is, guys, are you crazy? Are you nuts? Right?
Right.
You start opposing it, right? And this is what we do in organizations. We try to bring somebody down if it's a stupid idea. The improvised
Right.
mindset is, yeah, let's go climb up the wall. And why don't we do it like not for real, but pretend there is a wall there? Okay. So
I love it. Yep.
Yeah. So you responded to the cue. You never said you negated it. You actually said yes to the cue, and you put your own version on top of that. Okay.
Yep.
And
I love that thinking.
yeah, and so as actors, one guy would say something, and everybody jumps on that, and then something else, and then we change it slightly, and so we were always following each other's cue, and we were building upon each other's ideas rather than destroying each other's ideas.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
I
Yes.
mean, can you imagine an organization that builds upon each other rather than destroys and always criticizes?
Yeah, well, you would have a high performing organization, that is for sure. And it's so interesting, isn't it, Vitaly, that most human beings actually lean towards the negative. It's so much easier to be negative or to say no instead of yes and.
Of course, we're
It's just like
trained.
a natural.
Right, right. We're trained in critical thinking, right? Right. Break the problem
Yep,
down, find where the problem is, and tell them what's wrong with it.
that's right.
Which is
I
similar.
love
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love how you said earlier though about this is it's about living in the present moment and not clinging to a lot of the things in the past. I think that's a huge takeaway when we talk about improv mindset.
Exactly. Improv happens in the moment, and it is a training because most of us, unfortunately, the way our mind works, it picks up our experiences in the past, particularly traumatic experiences, and says, no, this time I'm not gonna work. I'm not gonna go there. I've been hurt before. I'm not gonna do this again. And so it starts to protect. There's a lot of fear, and so we stop being players, team players, and we start becoming, an obstacle to the process.
It's funny. I have a quick story to share with you. When I was in high school, I had a mentor. I made a decision. I was going in the Air Force, and there was this old retired colonel who was from the Korean War and a neighbor of mine, and would mentor me on certain things. And one of the things he convinced me to do at a young age, I was 14, 15-year-old at this point. He convinced me to go to Toastmasters. Are you familiar with Toastmasters?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah, yeah.
you learn how to, give speeches and things like that. And as a high schooler going into high school, he said, the most important skill I want you to take that will pay dividends throughout your entire life is to go to Toastmasters. But I don't want you to just go to Toastmasters because they teach you in several different places. They teach you how to give a 2 or 3 minute speech, how to give a long town hall speech. But there's another course that they give you. It's called improv. And I want you to learn how to speak properly, how to give speeches properly in all that context. But I want you to do it from an improv point of view. And it will change the way the rest of your life will be because you will have an improv type mindset. And of course, obviously learn to communicate and articulate and all that stuff. And I never at the time understood why he wanted me to do that because it was hard and it wasn't easy and all those kind of things. But I will tell you, I look back now, it was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten in my entire life was to take Toastmasters, learn how to communicate correctly, but then also to be a part of the improv portion of it. To your point also, you don't even know what the answers are yet, but you've got to be able to think so quick, that agility kind of mindset.
Exactly. And that's pretty much all we can do. This is how we train not just leaders, but everybody in the organization. Hey, as stuff come up, as your roles change, as customers disappear, you can either fold into your conservative, basically go back to your shell, or you can just respond and say, and yes, okay, great. And how do we do it? Let's find another solution.
So how do you handle when you let's say you're in this organization and it's the end yes kind of mentality and everybody's going into it, how do you create opposing views, kind of the devil's advocate, whether it's in a good context or all of a sudden you have someone that completely disagrees with you? How do you start to handle the yin and yang of kind of a normal dynamic that's almost in any organization?
Perfect. You led into the third skill that we have, which is called polarity thinking. Okay.
Polarity thinking.
Yeah. Polarity thinking, right? So we're always going to be faced with, do I do that or do I do this? And they all seem to be opposites, right?
Right.
If I go with it, so if somebody suggests something and you have a completely different view of the thing, you think he's going in completely wrong direction. Let's go invest in China. And somebody say, you crazy? We haven't even invested in the US first. Why would we go to China? You can do that. And that's pretty much criticizing their point of view and then saying, well, you're wrong, I'm right. And that's usually leads to stalemates. And not only that, people get really upset about that, right? It creates conflict that is not
You
a
bet.
positive conflict, right? You're just negating what I said. So I think we have to be careful. The polarity thinking is about identifying the both polarities, right? Yes, and that each polarity has a pro and a con, right?
Right.
Going to China is a positive thing. We might get more revenue. He has a con because it's a new territory. Staying here, we might not, we're not expanding. So we value both polarities. Well, first of all, we don't make him wrong. That's the first thing. Okay, there's nothing wrong with either one of them. And then we find the third solution that is beyond the two polarities that may be the most appropriate one. So we think we need to start thinking beyond the polarities, So it may be, listen, okay, China might not be out of reach, but if we go to Singapore, Hong Kong, this is still a Western culture, so it means much easier for us to adopt, and we're getting what we want. You know what I mean? I'm just making it up, improvising.
Sure. Yeah. Improvising again. That's right. I love the fact that if you can acknowledge the point that, let's say you're polar opposites and you got this polarity going on, if you can get the other person or the other organization or team or whatever to agree on that there's a pro and con to both sets, I think that extends the conversation right there. That's pretty awesome that you get both sides to do the pros and cons, because I think that's in most high performing organizations, they'll at least take a critical look at the pros and cons of the opposite fields. But then this and beyond is kind of the meeting in the middle, right? Finding the best, the next practice, not the best practice.
Exactly. And it may not. The interesting thing, it may not be even the middle. Okay, it's not about settling for
compromise.
For the compromise. It's maybe a completely different, out of the box. Typically, if you can hold the polarities for long enough without destroying each other, and actually, just look at something else comes up that unites the two, and what we want is the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you bet.
And this is what.
I love this. This is a fantastic conversation. I mean, I continue to visualize the growing tree, the growing organization, because I see how this all interconnects. What else am I missing, Vitaly? A lot of this conversation is a natural flow, but are there other points that you think is important for the audience to kind of think about when we talk about from the viewpoint of a living organization?
Yes, and I think one of the most important points is we need to come back to the practical reality of what the responsibility of leaders is, right? Because sometimes we as practitioners of human-centric organizations, we talk about these things, and then we go into an executive boardroom, which I spend a lot of time, and the board says, okay, all wonderful, terrific, heart-centered, fantastic, improvised, fantastic. Show me the result.
Yeah.
Show me the result. Okay.
That's reality.
Okay. What is your EBIT? What's the profit and loss? What's the engagement level? What's the innovation level? What's the business effectiveness, operational effectiveness? These are the KPIs. And then the guy says, well, we're not quite there, but we're investing in our people. And guess what happens? I've been this, and I say, well, thank you very much. Your contract has expired,
Yeah.
In your fantastic.
Yeah, that's the cold-hearted fact.
Yeah, but you have not performed. You have not performed. And so now what I say to people, this living organization or agile organization or adaptive, whatever all these buzzwords are, yes, we want to be heart-centered. We want to do all that. But the key is, how do we get results? As leaders, we're responsible for impact we create. And what I've studied is there a correlation between all this stuff and getting results? And what we found is there's phenomenal correlation. All the top performing companies, they use at least a subset, or if not all of this, what we talked about. Google, at least at the start, was using a lot of this collaborative, ESN, improvisational, everybody's working together in circles, very little hierarchy, so it's changed as they corporatized and became bureaucratic. But a lot of these organizations that are really particular, I guess what I call them, I don't know, what would you call them? They're the new internet baby, where these guys already come in with that mindset, right? The young,
Yep.
the disruptive organizations, right?
Yep.
That's what they come in with. That they go, this is how we play here, and they produce results that disrupt the whole industry, right?
That's correct.
So
The innovators.
yeah, exactly. So, but we do have to demonstrate to the board and the CEO, if you're a team leader, then to your boss, that this delivers results. So we have to have a feedback loop. We just still have to measure performance, reviews and so on, and see how that goes. There is a study called Terms of Endearment. Terms of Endearment is a book or 10-year study of organizations that operate from the heart more, that really value their people. I think that took really big companies, IKEA and so on, Disney, and really top. And they found that those companies over, I think, a 10 or 12-year period outperformed the S&P 500 by 12 to 1. So the results are there. Yeah.
Well, I think anybody that's listening, I think would agree this would be the type of organization they would want to work in, right? It's almost like this natural thing. These are the things that if they existed in your organization, you'd be very happy.
Right. Yeah, so purely from attracting smart people, that also would work, right? Mm-hmm.
You bet. So, Vitaly, this has just been absolutely fascinating. And I love how we kind of ended it on the responsibility of the leader. It started with the leader, all the way back from Wolf, trying to figure this out, creating the environment to be successful, understanding human nature, and then, ending it with the true responsibility still lands on those leaders' shoulders to be able to produce, but they've got to not only look in the mirror, but look out in the organization and go, have I created the scenario? Have I set the conditions to make all of that happen? And then the results will get produced almost naturally because that environment's set there.
You said it perfectly.
Awesome. Well, Vitaly, I think we've all had our eyes opened and our minds opened to what a living organization should look like, the concept of it. And I think we're all stronger for having this conversation today. Can't thank you enough for joining us today. And I'd love to leave you with the last words.
Last words. Oh, wow. Wonderful improvisational. I think the last words is particular now. I mean, I know there's a lot of organizations that are hurting. They're literally, some of their revenue disappeared, and the people are sitting at home, don't know whether their jobs are going to be secure or not. Right now is the best time to start creating those kind of environments, really heart-centered, caring environments for people. Be authentic, be genuine. It's almost like the best strategy for the future, and it's not just for now. It's to grow. Eventually, hopefully, this COVID will be over, and we'll go back and we'll start recreating, organizations. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do it moving forward into the future? Hopefully through a living organization way.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I'll steal some of your saying that, yes, we are at the height of this COVID epidemic, and we may never go back to how the way that things were, but we're living in the present right now, and what can we do about it? And we start planting those seeds for the living organization. So, Vitaly, thank you again for joining us. The tribe is smarter for listening to your conversation, and we appreciate you being here today.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week. Talking to Vitaly about leading the living organization was a lesson in deep thinking about how we view people and the work around us. Don't forget our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways and suggested action plans. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend so we can continue to build our tribe. Join our Facebook group to get even more behind-the-scenes action and exclusive content for leaders and followers. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron, and make yourself and others around you better every single day.